There once lived a great Mongol Khan. He gathered the sheep on his lawn. I looked away for a sec to upgrade my tech, but then I found out he was gone. Hey guys, James here again with another game review, this time talking about Age of Empires 4, the latest entry in the long-running AoE franchise, with this one being developed by Relic Entertainment. Age of Empires is of course one of the classic long-running real-time strategy franchises, and this game largely delivers a classic RTS experience. For those unfamiliar, in this game you play as one of a variety of different historical empires as you gather resources, build your empire, produce soldiers, and eliminate your enemies. I do have a confession to make first though. Coming from a StarCraft background, I of course have played a good amount of RTS games, but because of some of my more elitist attitudes at the time, I actually didn't play much AoE growing up. As a result, I'm not going to be comparing the game against any other games in the AoE franchise. Overall though, I do have to say, I'm really enjoying AoE4 way more than I thought I would. While it is more on the simplistic side of RTS games when compared to, say, StarCraft 2, I actually think the simplicity is one of its strengths. I do think there are some areas that can be improved, but the game has actually reignited some of my love for the RTS genre as a whole. So without further ado, let's dive into this review. So of course, let's start off with the core gameplay. In each game of Age of Empires, you can play as one of a number of medieval civilizations in 1v1 or up to 4v4 matches. So far, they have 8 in the game, which actually provides pretty decent world history coverage, although it would definitely be cool to see this be expanded in the future, especially considering previous games have far larger rosters. Each civilization has unique abilities, buildings, and units, which helps to make each one feel a little bit different. Even with these uniques though, I do think that at their core, every civilization does feel fairly similar to play, as most share a number of units, buildings, and mechanics. That's not necessarily an issue or anything, but it is just something to point out to people who might be coming from a more asymmetrical game like StarCraft. Me personally, I've been playing the Mongols a lot, who I do think are probably the most unique civilization of the bunch. I've been really enjoying them, and honestly, just looking over their mechanics, I can't help but feel like they are pretty busted. Even so, I think you can definitely find success with any civilization, although I definitely won't say it's perfectly balanced or anything. The game actually has a really interesting map system. Rather than having set maps with set spawns, maps here are procedurally generated based on templates. Essentially, every game will get a specified map type. Based on the template you get, the map will have a general layout it follows, but the specifics of each map and the location of resources is randomly generated as you load in. While this is definitely a cool system and helps with replayability, I do think it can lead to some slight imbalances at times with starting positions. I think it's fairly minor, but I do think you can sometimes have bad luck with where your closest resources are. Like most other RTS games, once you load in, you'll find yourself with a town center which acts as your main base, as well as a number of villagers. Villagers are the core of your empire as they help you gather resources, develop your economy, and build your infrastructure. Then, you build up your army and attempt to dominate your enemy. One thing to note is, maybe because of the fact that there are 4 resource types with fairly distinct uses, balancing and managing your resources feels particularly important here. One of the unique mechanics in place is the age system. You start the game off in the Dark Age. In order to unlock additional technologies, you're required to construct landmarks which advance you into the next age. At every age, you get a choice of 2 landmarks to build from which grant your civ different bonuses, and this makes it so that even the same civ can differ slightly game to game. Landmarks are a fairly significant investment both in time and resources, so you'll want to make sure you have enough of an economy as well as an army in order to tech up safely. There's a total of 4 ages in the game. There are 3 main methods of winning the game, which can add some nice variety. The first and probably most common one would be the landmark victory. Your goal here is to destroy all of your enemy's landmarks. This can actually lead to some pretty intense games as you may run into people who will try to rush down your landmarks, and you'll often find yourself racing opponents to the finish. The second type is the sacred site victory. On most maps you'll have zones on the map called sacred sites. You need to create religious units in order to capture these zones, then, after capturing all the zones on the map, you need to hold them for 10 minutes without losing them to your opponent. Finally, you have the Wonder Victory. Wonders are massive buildings you can construct once you enter the final age of the game. They require a ton of resources to be built, so you likely won't be making a wonder until fairly late in the game. However, once you do create a wonder, the enemy will need to destroy your wonder within 15 minutes. Personally, I find sacred and wonder victories to be a bit hit or miss. Due to the time limit you need to hold them and their set locations, it can often lead to some pretty massive battles as time ticks down. However, it can also sometimes be a bit anticlimactic if you find yourself facing an opponent who might not be as good or very aware of what's going on. The result is that sometimes you might find the game ending before an awesome final battle can take place. So now you're probably wondering, how does the game actually feel to play? And honestly, I'm loving how the game feels. AoE is definitely on the more simplistic side when compared to, say, StarCraft 2, which can often feel like a game designed to stress you out and break your fingers. I'm going to use some terms here which might be well known to other RTS players, but I'll try my best to include definitions on the screen just for everyone else's understanding. So one of the big things I'm really liking about the gameplay is the simplicity of the units and the fact that units can live and fight for quite a while. I hate to make this a video bashing StarCraft 2, as I truly do enjoy the game, but one of my biggest issues with it was always the fact that, especially at lower levels, some fights can end up lasting only a couple of seconds, and you really can't look away from your army without risking them getting melted by a couple of spells. Additionally, they decided to give almost every single unit some sort of ability that you need to micro. This doesn't really exist in Age, and as a result, I personally find the combat feels a lot better here. Here, I think fights feel a lot more like Brood War and can often be long, intense affairs. And let's face it, one of the best parts of playing an RTS game is sitting back and enjoying the battles, and here, I actually feel like you can watch the battles unfold, even if it might not be ideal to do so. In fact, I'd say that over-microing in Age can actually be far more hurtful than helpful because units tend to rotate and move across the map much slower by design. As a result, even though macro and micro are still very important, I think the game has a very large focus on positioning and decision making, particularly around unit compositions. This is because the combat is largely built around a weapon triangle of sorts. In general, melee units counter horsemen, who counter archers, who counter melee units. I actually don't love hard counter systems personally, as it can sometimes feel bad if you just end up not having enough of a specific unit type in a fight, although I guess this does make scouting your enemy strategy particularly important. I personally would have liked a system more built around positioning. Based on my current understanding, unit counters will deal additional damage to the countered units. However, I can't help but feel like if I manage to get my horsemen to attack their spearmen from the back, it should give me some sort of flanking bonus, almost akin to how horsemen can wreck poor phalanx positioning in a Total War game, for example. Instead here, it feels like I have to make specific units to counter my enemy and micro in a way to attack the right units. I know I'm complaining about it, but it's really not as bad as I make it seem. I've largely adapted to the system, and I do find the system can really reward good micro and tactics. Again, since units are much slower, I do think correctly positioning and protecting key units becomes extremely important. Even though I don't like hard counters from a design perspective, I do think it works well in the context of the game, and it makes sense why it was designed this way. Another big mechanic they have is the wall system. All civilizations other than the Mongols have the ability to construct walls. These can help you control the map and set up proper defenses for your lands. A result is, of course, though, that the game can feel a bit more turtley by nature. Thankfully, melee units are able to construct rams and siege towers, and you're also able to build siege units like trebuchets to help take care of enemy walls, and watching these fights can be pretty awesome. I think it's also worth quickly mentioning that there can be rivers and seas in the game, which also allows you to have naval battles, which can be pretty crazy. However, these do feel a bit slower, and I don't think they're quite as balanced at the moment. As much as I do enjoy the core gameplay, I do have some slight issues, although I'm not so sure these are things that they can or should really address. I think one issue can be that it can sometimes be a bit hard to target certain things you want. Maybe it's just me being bad, but I sometimes have trouble target firing on specific walls or units. I also find that sometimes unit pathing can be a bit buggy, and I think this goes back to the whole over-microing thing. Issuing too many commands can sometimes just cause your units to freak out a little bit. Finally, I do think games can last quite long. Not every game will be insane, but I do find that games will easily last 30 plus minutes. But again, this could maybe just be because I'm bad. If you're at all confused or scared by any of the things I said, don't be. They actually include a really good training area with different challenges and resources to help new players, especially those new to RTS games. This will help you develop your skills and understand the game. In particular, I've been really enjoying team games, even though they can be a bit chaotic, and I also wonder if we'll see custom games and whatnot in the future, as I think these always help to increase the longevity of games. If you're not a big PvP player, fear not, the game has quite an extensive campaign mode. There are currently 4 campaigns, each consisting of a decent number of levels. Each campaign takes you through a series of historical battles, and it was cool to learn about some history I hadn't known before. The campaign is solid overall, although at times maybe a bit unremarkable. It has a lot of your typical RTS type missions: defend this area, attack these guys, survive this long, yada yada. There are some pretty cool missions though. For example, one which stood out to me was a Rust mission where you had to set up and maintain multiple trade routes and protect them from raiders coming from all directions. While most levels aren't too bad, there are some which can actually be surprisingly difficult at times, although this can sometimes be a mix of not knowing or understanding an objective, or not being aware of what was going to happen next. Another really cool part of the campaign is the additional content they provide. They include some really cool videos as rewards for beating stages, and these videos are usually educational videos to teach you things about the units and empires you're playing as. These are definitely a treat for anyone who enjoys history. Finally, let's talk about some of the technical stuff. Here, I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. The game has a lot of features of modern RTS games, like multiple building selection and unlimited unit selection, so the game does feel very modern and streamlined to play. One area though that might get some mixed reviews would be the hotkey system. They currently use a grid-based hotkey system, and as far as I can tell, I can't change the keys for specific units or production. On the one hand, a grid-based system can be quite simple to understand, but I also find it to be harder to memorize hotkeys as a result, since everything tends to feel very generalized. Obviously, with enough experience, this becomes a non-issue, but as of now, I do find myself needing to look at the bottom panel to make sure I'm building the right things. I also don't like how the escape key doesn't cancel production of things. I guess it just feels a bit weird to me. From a graphical perspective, I think the game is alright. It's a very simple graphical style, and I've heard it kind of looks like AoE2, which is a bit funny considering how old that game is. I don't think the game looks bad by any means, but I guess it does leave some to be desired in that department. Additionally, I do think that maybe it could use a bit more visual clarity at times, as sometimes I do find myself unsure of what units are in a group or ball. Finally, we have the audio, and honestly, I think the sound design is one of the best parts of the game. Each civ has music unique to their own culture, and I do think the intro splash screen song is a banger. In particular though, I think the unit sounds are amazing and some of the best I've heard in a game. Although maybe it can be a bit much at times, hearing your soldiers yell and the sound of a massive cavalry march is just so satisfying. Seriously, just listen to that. In fact, sometimes I think the sound design might almost be too good. I know it sounds crazy to criticize it for being too good, but whenever my worker lines are getting harassed, hearing my villagers screaming can sometimes be a bit horrific. Overall, I have really been loving Age of Empires 4, and I do think it has rekindled some of my love for the RTS genre. Despite my criticisms, I do think the game is just super well done and very satisfying to play. I would love to see more content in the future, and I think this is a fantastic foundation to build upon. For me personally, I would definitely say it's worth the $60 price tag, but of course, with RTS being a more niche genre, your mileage may vary. I'm giving AoE4 a 3.5 out of 4, and honestly, the game is teetering on a 4 for me. Hopefully, with more content and improvements going forward, I think the game has potential to become my favorite RTS game of all time, and that's saying something considering how much I love StarCraft Brood War. But hey, that's just me. Have you tried AoE4 and what did you think of it? And of course, if you made it this far, I truly do appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button as it really helps my channel, and as usual, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.